Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I've got a guest tonight that I'm going to welcome back, Rebecca Rosenblat. That's correct. Hey, Rosenblat, who is a clinical psychologist. She's a sex therapist. She's an incredibly intelligent young lady, and she's going to tell us tonight about the 10 commandments of healthy relationships. We've had, I guess, 3 prior conversations. One, we talked about sex addiction, which was really kind of interesting. Another conversation we had, we talked about the different types of attachment theories and while people were together. And then the last conversation we had was about gender differences. And it was a really fascinating conversation about the differences between how men think and communicate and how women think and communicate. So it's been a really interesting series of conversations we've had. And tonight we're going to talk about healthy relationships. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me back. It's always a great time on your show.
So tell me about healthy relationships. What are the 10 commandments that you think of for healthy relationships?
Well, in essence, I mean, relationships can either click or they can tick away like a time bomb. So what I call my 10 commandments are basically 10 things that we look out for. So maybe you can go point by point. So starting with what's the foundation? It's so simple. If we know we matter and our feelings matter, that's it. It's as simple as that.
We have to matter. We have to
matter. Yeah, we have to know that we matter. I matter to you. My feelings matter to you. And once you have that, that's sort of the backbone and the foundation. The 4 pillars then are: my partner is accessible, responsive, engaged, and they have my back.
Responsive
Yes. And engaged.
Engaged.
So accessible, you're there. Responsive, you're actually paying attention. Engaged, you're participating. So I'm not feeling like you're distracted,
right,
or you're just off in another world, la la land. So once that happens, and they have our back, that's really, really important. Those are the 4 pillars. So if you have these elements, you can pretty much hold most relationships together. I mean, there can be circumstances which make it difficult, but that's basically it. And having the back, what it can look like is, if I'm in trouble or if I'm under attack, I want to know that my partner will show up for me. They'll take my side. And you don't have to agree with the person to take your side. A common one is I have a lot of couples, mixed ethnicity couples. And I hear this all the time where someone will say, my partner is a racist because I was at their home. They were having all these conversations with racist comments and they never stood up for me. And the partner is shocked. What do you mean I'm racist? I'm married to you, aren't I? And my family loves you. And I always turn around and I say, yes, and a misogynist never married a woman. That's my point, just to make the point that it can happen. But what that person needs at the time is that you have their back. So even if you think, oh, they're just joking around, this is how they are, me saying anything is just going to cause conflict, you want to let them know that we stand together, right, kind of stand grounded.
So tell me the 4 pillars again. So it's responsive.
So you're accessible.
Accessible.
You're
there for them.
Responsive.
So you respond back.
And you're not on your phone. You're looking at the person, and you're engaged. You're engaged in the conversation. This doesn't necessarily mean you're trying to fix them, as we know in the gender differences. That's not.
Don't want to be fixed necessarily.
Don't want to be fixed necessarily, but just you're engaged. You're interested in what I'm saying, and then it's you have my back. Those are the 4 things.
Fascinating.
Very simple, very easily doable.
And this is the kind of conversation you'll have with couples when they come for couples counseling.
Yes, I will ask them, I try to see where they're at, do they have a good foundation? Do they have the pillars? And do they feel each other's love tank? Do they speak each other's love language? I mean, there's a billion topics in there, but for today, it's I want to make sure that they have this basic stuff, because without that, a relationship will just crumble.
We're chatting with Rebecca Rosenblat tonight, clinical psychologist, a sex therapist, a couples therapist, about healthy relationships. We're going to take a break for some messages and be back in just 2 minutes. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. My guest tonight is Dr. Rebecca Rosenblat, and I think I got your title wrong. You're not a clinical psychologist, you're a psychologist and a clinical sexologist. Is that correct?
Sexologist and a registered psychotherapist.
And a registered psychotherapist. And you do counseling. You do couples counseling, you do personal counseling, you do
counseling, I do groups, I do a lot of different things.
Okay. And so you've got a website that we can go to if we want to check you out. What's the website?
talkwithrebecca.com.
talkwithrebecca.com. And tonight we're talking about the 10 commandments of healthy relationships. And the first one was that we need to know that we matter and that our feelings matter. And Rebecca has described to us 4 pillars. The first is being accessible, then responsive, then engaged, and then finally has our back. So what's the key feature in relationships that establishes whether they are successful or they fail?
In essence, if we can allow our positive feelings to overwhelm our negative feelings. And Dr. John Gottman, he says that distinguishes the masters from the disasters.
The masters from the
From
disasters.
the masters from the disasters. But if we allow our, whatever junk goes on in our head, so in other words, we ascribe intention or motivation that isn't there to our partner, we look for the negative in the situation. You can take a benign situation and it can simply explode. It can just go off the rails because we're fighting something that's not even there. So when couples come in and someone says to me, I'm always walking on eggshells, I know that it's more than likely that's a key element there. And interestingly, both of the parties start to feel like they're walking on eggshells after a while, because here's the person who sort of barks at the other person, they retreat, they're non-confrontational, this person gets even louder because they're like, I will make you listen, just in case you missed it. So they'll get really, really loud, and then the other person just shuts down, and so they feel dismissed, they get angry, they say, you're mad at me, I can never say anything to you, you're upset, you're resentful, they'll just kind of project all kinds of junk. And they'll say, I can never talk to you, you're so sensitive, and I don't know why I bother, I'm always walking on eggshells. So it kind of gets flipped around and the other party's thinking, what? I thought I was the one walking on eggshells. So that's kind of a telltale sign.
Right.
And that there's somebody that's sort of trying to let their negative feelings override the positive. And we also have mirror cells. If one person's doing it, sooner or later the other person will start doing it.
I read a book by it's Gottman, you said, Dr. Gottman, called The Mathematics of Marriage. And it was fascinating because what it was a bunch of research that suggested there had to be 7 times as many positive interactions as negative interactions to predict success in a relationship. And they did this by just videotaping couples and interacting in regular life for like 15 minutes. And they would count up the negative interactions versus the positive interactions. And if there wasn't this dramatic multiple, and effectively what they were saying is that you remember the negative and it has a far bigger impact on you than the positive. So you got to have a lot more positives equal to negative. But it was also interesting that said that if you don't have any negative, then it's like you're a wallflower and you're being walked over. And so that won't work either. You can't have a Pollyanna kind of a situation.
And it's essentially through conflict where we resolve our issues and we have more of an intimate relationship instead of just a yes person. And and in fact, the ratio is even trickier than that, because what he did was he had couples move into what he called the love lab, and they were, they were sensors. So perspiration, heart rate, etc. Everything was being recorded. And then frame by frame, we're talking split second, they were trying to see what the changes are. And they got a slew of data. And he's the only person in the world ever to have that kind of research. And so he can tell whether or not people stay together with over 90% accuracy. And we'll come into that point soon, so I'll save it for that.
Okay, fascinating. So that's the first and the second commandment. The third one is the number one thing that can protect a relationship. What's the number one thing that can protect a relationship?
Nurturing and expressing fondness and mutual admiration. If we can do that, we fill each other's love tanks and we make each other feel good. So it's great. Unfortunately, majority of the people, they end up being the most critical of their partner. And the ratio, I know initially was that, but since then he's saying the ratio should be 25 good things to 1 negative thing.
What, really? 25 to 1, not 7 to 1?
No,
oh my God.
And when you're fighting, it's still 5 to 1. So you don't have the right to say anything negative until you kind of build a strong enough base so the other person can say, okay, I can buy into that. You're not always criticizing. But we tend to criticize our partner more than anyone else because...
That's interesting. We tend to criticize our partner more than anyone else.
Absolutely. Because we have the most invested in them. And so our expectations are high, the stakes are high, and also they'll put up with us.
Yeah.
Like if somebody else says something like, if we said that to someone else, they're just not going to put up with it. But our partners will. So we get away with it.
That's fascinating. Okay, so that's number 3, which is nurturing and expressing fondness and admiration. So what's number 4? The love is the most important Is love the most important ingredient for making a relationship work?
Contrary to what people believe, it's in fact compassion. Because
What's
love,
the difference in love and compassion?
well, love, I mean,
I thought it was always what happened. Never mind, I won't say that.
I'm interested in hearing what you have to say. But with compassion, there's empathy. You put yourself in the other party's shoes and you're thinking of what it's like to be them. How are they experiencing you? With love, it's like everybody's feeling good, and it's like it's easy to love someone.
Right.
But it's compassion, and compassion is built through tough moments when we find solutions together. So compassion is built up in tougher moments, and that's why it's more critical. How do we show up for each other in tougher moments? Are we able to actually put ourselves in the other party's shoes? And are we able to support them in those moments? And to support someone and be part of the proverbial solution versus the problem, you need compassion. So that's the key component.
So it's almost as if you need to have some challenges in a relationship to see
Oh,
how
yeah.
you work through them, and
Yeah.
that you can show that compassion and
Mhm.
resilience and love and
you
establish
grow.
a stronger relationship.
And you grow through it. If you're not challenged, then it's like da, 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 but you're not necessarily, like, there's some passion in there.
Okay, and so therefore, you've got number 5 is we all think we're right when it comes to what goes down in a relationship. Doubly so when issues arise. We think it's the other party's fault and we're getting the raw end of the stick. How do we get past that?
So first of all, we need to recognize there's no such thing as an absolute reality. There's 2 subjective realities that are based in 3 very long histories: yours, your partner's, and the relationship history.
Okay.
So we need to kind of acknowledge that. And in order to be able to move through that seamlessly, we have to listen to be influenced. Usually when somebody says something like that, we're ready to rebut. We're ready to argue, make our own point, get defensive, and we're not even listening. And that's the wrong part of the brain that's activated. But if we go in with the intention to be influenced, I want to hear what you have to say. So it would be like as if I'm your attorney. It doesn't matter what I think you did or didn't do. I have to be there and really know what you're all about, what you're thinking, if I'm to defend you.
Right.
So at the end of the day, it's listening to be influenced as opposed to influence the other party.
Listening to be influenced.
Yeah.
Rather than.
Yeah. So sell me on your point. I want to know what you're thinking. I want to know what you're feeling, and I want to work with you.
So it's sort of that one minute manager thing about first listen to understand and then speak to be understood. So that you've got to, and lots of people have told me that one of the best ways to do that is to repeat back to someone what they said, such that it confirms both to you and to them that you heard them and that you understand what they're saying. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So you repeat exactly how they say it. You don't change it. And you say, did I get it right? And then you validate. You go, yeah, that must feel awful for you. And then you have empathy. You put yourself in their shoes, and then you connect. And that's where the compassion piece comes in. But those are the 3 simple steps. And it's interesting. We're born to do that, but we change. When babies come, look at them. They mirror us. Like, they see you smile, they smile back. They do one of these things with open body language. You're there. I know I see you there.
Right.
And then you do that. You kind of go back and forth. You synchronize your movements, and everything goes all well. I mean, I'm sure you've been in a situation where babies in row in front of you at some event, and once they start the game, they don't want to stop. They're having such a great time. You think, okay, I'm getting tired. I want to listen, but they're so cute and they do that. So that's built into us, but we just go against it at some point. We learn to go against it. And we have 2 default settings, love and war. If we're trying to listen to be influenced, the love setting, it takes hold and everything feels good. If we are listening to rebut, the war setting, which is usually the more default setting, unsafe, I'm on war, so you can never be on the same page. So
that's interesting. So listen to understand.
Yes.
And
to
listen,
be influenced.
And to be influenced versus listen to rebut. So
Mm-hmm.
we either want to listen to learn something, to understand,
absolutely,
to accept what the other person is saying in their argument, or we're just listening so that we can figure out how we're going to rebut and argue with them.
You nailed it.
That's interesting. That's fascinating.
Most of this stuff is very simple.
So we're talking about the 10 commandments of healthy relationships, and our guest is Dr. Rebecca Rosenblat. And the first one was knowing that we matter and our feelings matter. And the second thing is that we need to have positive thoughts that override our negative ones. And I was thinking it was 7-1, and Dr. Rebecca has been telling me that it's got to be 20 to 1?
25 to 1.
25
and 5
to 1.
to 1 when we're fighting.
25 to 1 in regular times and 5 to 1
Mhm.
when we're fighting. The third is nurturing and expressing fondness and admiration.
Mhm.
So is this like PDA or just holding hands or
No, it's just really
cuddling or
it's letting the other person know that they're very important and admiring what they do and not letting those little moments get away. So it is just appreciating them in essence.
and then number 4 is that love is not the most important ingredient, it's compassion.
Mhm. Mhm.
And you've got down here that love is a verb. What do you mean by that?
It's something you do. If you're just saying I love you to someone and you're not showing it, it doesn't mean anything. If anything, your narrative is saying, yeah, right. So you have to show them. So you have to show up in a way that we've been talking
Right.
about, and we'll continue to talk about. You have to show up in that way.
You have to show up in
And
the
yeah, we have to
relationship.
show up, and it's the actions. It's the actions. It's not just saying an empty I love you. Anybody could say that.
Okay. And then the 5th one is that we have to listen to the other party with this mindset of being influenced by them, being willing to be influenced by them, by really hearing them and wanting to understand what they're saying, versus what you say is too often happening where we're just listening so we can argue back and rebut.
Because that seems to be the natural tendency. Like somebody starts speaking, words are barely out of them. Oh, I know what this topic is. This is how I'm going to defend myself. This is how I'm going to rebut. And different part of the brain is activated at that point.
We're talking with Dr. Rebecca Rosenblat, a psychologist, a clinical sexologist, a couples therapist with a website called talkwithrebecca.com. Today about the 10 commandments of healthy relationships. We're going to take a break and be back in just 2 minutes. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. My guest tonight is Dr. Rebecca Rosenblat. She is a psychologist, a clinical sexologist, a sex therapist, a couples therapist, an individual therapist, someone that really helps us in our life trying to figure things out. She's got a great website called talkwithrebecca.com. Go check it out if you're interested in listening a little bit more to what Dr. Rebecca Rosenblat's got to say. Tonight, we're talking about healthy relationships, and Rebecca has 10 commandments of healthy relationships. We've just gone through the first 5, and we'll review them all again for you later in case you've missed them. But we're now on to number 6, and what you were arguing in number 6 is that we can make our partner angrier than anyone else. How do we deal with that?
So in essence, the space between a couple is a very sacred space because it's very emotionally charged. So it can be the container of greatest joy or greatest sorrow. So we really have to protect that space. So when we get angry, we have to look within ourselves to see what is this all about, follow it to the source. Why am I really angry? What is it bringing up in me? What am I feeling in my body? Have I felt this way before? Maybe as a kid, maybe in a previous relationship. What just came up for me? And what's the narrative that came up? So rather than ascribing meaning to what a partner is saying, we're looking for our own narrative. And then it allows us to be responsive because, if we're overreacting, something else in our past has piggybacked onto what experiencing in this particular moment. Something got triggered. But when we say, okay, I'm really upset about because, I feel like a little kid being yelled at, and it's not necessarily because my partner is trying to be a little bit animated in how they're talking to me, then we don't tend to respond to their anger, but we think, okay, this is my narrative. So it goes back to not describing negative motivation or intention. When it comes to a partner's anger, it's really, really critical to recognize that anger is often a secondary emotion in us and in the other individual. So it's secondary to feeling hurt, sadness, guilt, shame, like they've let their partner down. So, in one of the relationships, I thought, well, why are you mad at me? Like, I should be mad at you, kind of thing. And then recognize that the person is feeling like they've let you down. So anger allows us to control the conversations. Just like a kid will have temper tantrum when they're really blown it. They want to be louder than you because they need to say, calm down, instead of getting mad at them.
Right.
So it's the same kind of thing. So if we're able to see that they're probably upset about, more angry at themselves than they are at us. It just allows us that little space not to personalize it.
So what are some of the rules? You're saying that we need to take a break.
Yes, and we do need to take a break. So if it's escalating like crazy, we just need to do what they tell us in driving school, just put on the brakes. But a lot of us tend to, we see the red light and we just step on it. And then if we crash and burn, well, that's not good.
So are timeouts helpful to park a discussion, park an
Yes,
argument?
they're very, very important. So when we feel that we're going to that place, we're flooding, heart is racing, face is flushed. So we know that we've been activated physiologically because we're getting ready for fight flight at that point. Then we need to take a time out. So what that looks like is, why don't we take a break and come back to it? But when you
In
take
10 minutes or the next day?
No, it has to be no less than 20 minutes and ideally no more than 24 hours. But let's say, you've got something big going on in the next 24 hours and you're not going to be able to talk about it. You're better off saying, okay, day after tomorrow, as opposed to promising tomorrow when it's not going to happen because the trust is
Well, and
broken.
particularly if it's late at night and the argument's going on, like why, when you're tired and you're going to
You're
say something,
looping.
you're looping.
You're
Exactly.
looping in 20 minutes, you're looping. You're just going to say the same thing.
So my father also always used to tell me never go to bed mad. That if you're with someone that you love, do whatever in bed, cheer up, and you can talk about the argument the next day.
So you have to park it somewhere because otherwise the brain doesn't let go. So you have to say, okay, let's talk about it at such and such time. And at that point, be loving, but don't feel that you have to resolve it. So yeah, you can not go to bed, fighting with each other, but sometimes we are angry. We can't help it because
Right.
we're hurt, and that's okay. As long as we maintain that, we love the other person, we can give them a hug if they can tolerate it. Sometimes people don't want that. So it's very simple. It's just like kind of take time out and then come back to it, but always come back to it. It's not a get out of jail free card. You have to come back.
It's not a get out of jail free
No,
card.
it's not that, okay, we'll talk about it another time and you never come back to it. And so, kind of nip it, but don't start and then say, never mind. You got to engage your brain before, before you put your mouth in gear, according to Benjamin Franklin. But it's really important not to start and then say, never mind. Because you know what? The best way to get someone to listen to you is say, never mind. They'll drop their electronics, they'll turn around, they look at you, their eyes will pop out, and boy, they're totally engaged. That's
So
how
never mind means shut up, buddy, and really listen to me.
So
Sounds
it'll
good.
have the opposite effect.
Number 7 is you're saying that people often say that relationships aren't good because we can't communicate. Is that true?
Well, when a couple walks in, they often start that way, that we're having problems communicating. And what I'm hearing is we're not connected. We feel misunderstood. It's almost like we're speaking different languages. That's what I'm hearing. So first and foremost, I tell them, replace the word communication with connection.
Okay.
And put everything through that filter. And when it comes to words,
what's the difference between communication and connection?
Connection is so much more. Communication is just talking. We can have oral diarrhea, or we can be brutally honest with focus on the word brutal. But connection is, we always keep in mind that what I'm saying, is it going to erode the connection, or is it going to help us stay close? So it has respect and you're not as brutal. And when it comes to the communication itself, it's really important. It's not just what you say, it's how you say it, and being mindful of that, because words can kill, they can destroy, and they can never take it back.
Yeah.
My dad used to say, if in doubt, leave it out. I thought it was pretty good, because he says, if you're in
If in doubt,
leave it out, because then you kind of know that no good is going to come out of it. There's a possibility that this is wrong and you don't move forward with it.
Right.
So it's kind of a nice gauge for ourselves, because we know when something is telling us don't keep going.
Right.
And that's when it's important to be kind, take care of each other's feelings. Because we never resolve anything during an argument, or if you're feeling misunderstood, it just doesn't work like that.
Right. Okay. So be connected.
Be connected. Yeah.
Are there things that we need to avoid to keep a relationship safe?
So Dr. Gottman, I know I quote him a lot because he's got a lot of good stuff. Dr. Gottman says that, we have to avoid the 4, what he calls horsemen of the apocalypse. And this is contempt, criticism, stonewalling, and defensiveness. If he sees those without any positive override, he can predict with over 90% accuracy that the couple's not going to last more than 5 years.
So let's talk the contempt.
Yes. So contempt doesn't have to be, in the traditional where we think, oh, you're feeling contempt. Contempt can also be talking down to a person from a place of one up.
Right.
Or giving them platitudes, just treating them as stupid. That means you're just not being respectful. You're just talking down to them.
How could you have contempt for your partner?
Oh, people do it all the time. And John has a really great example of it. He says, It's like, if somebody's talking and he says, I collect contemptuous moments. And he says, if somebody's talking and he said, I could care less. In the middle of the argument, you say, no, you mean you couldn't care less. So he says, so you just corrected them. That's contemptuous. Or anything where you think you're superior
Right.
and you talk down to them, that's contempt.
Okay. Criticism is
It's
obvious.
pretty straightforward.
Okay. Defensiveness, what's that?
So this is when you are so preoccupied with defending your own point that you're not even paying attention. You're just attack, because you want to defend yourself. And interestingly, when we're trying to defend ourselves, often we're just trying to redeem ourselves in the other person's eyes. You need to be right. But when you get defensive, there's like no room left to listen to the other party.
And stonewalling, what's that?
Shutting them out. So sometimes silence can be the loudest thing in a marriage. So when you just don't say anything, a lot of times people are non-confrontational, so they just shut down. I'm not talking about that, although it has the same impact. I'm talking about when a person says, okay, I'm shutting you out.
But what if you just need a day or two?
Then you park it a day or two later.
So parking is different than stonewalling.
Yeah, it's very different. Stonewalling, the wall comes up. It's like that other person isn't even there. You dismiss it. Online, there's a really cute video clip. Well, I'm not sure I call it cute, but it's called Still Face Experiment. And in there's this baby and mom, they're engaging. I encourage people to go Google that. Baby and mom, they're engaging, and it's really cute. And then they tell the mother to have a still face. And so she's not yelling at the baby. She's not raising her voice. She hasn't left the room. She's not frowning. She just has a still face. There's no expression. And in no time at all, the baby becomes completely undone. Completely undone in less than 2 minutes. And that follows us from the cradle to the grave. So when we see lack of expression, we go into survival mode. That you don't
like to say something.
Then I know you see me. Otherwise, I could die. A dragon could come, end of the world, and you don't even know I'm here.
Right.
How are you going to protect me?
Okay. So that's number 8. Number 9. Sometimes it's hard to have that grace when your partner has driven you to the brink. You'd rather jump than try to save anything. What do you do when you feel that way?
Well, grace by definition is given when it isn't deserved. But that's when
grace is given when it's not deserved.
Yes. So that's when I say,
that's interesting.
Think of the relationship as opposed to either party, because there are times you may be furious at your partner and you just don't feel much grace. You don't feel like cutting them any slack. But those are the moments where you say, okay, what's best for the relationship? Because what's good for the relationship is good for you as well. And now you've got skin in the game, and you're not adversaries at that point. Because in order for one party to win, the other party has to lose, and coupleship loses.
Okay. And number 10, we tend to be afraid of a lot of things in relationships. How do we navigate through these?
So here's the interesting piece. The flip side of fear is need. So as soon as there's fear, I say to people, identify what your need is and then ask for what you want, not complain about what you're not getting. And that is so critical. But let's say we screw up and or a partner screws up. Then what we do is we have to say, okay, they're just afraid, because this is what they're looking for. So we hear the longing in their voice. So let's say you say to me, you never spend time with me.
Yeah.
So rather than me saying, well, I spent last Wednesday and Thursday, I canceled golf, blah, 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 blah. That's not where you want to go. You want to say, okay, the longing in her voice is she would like to spend more time with me. And all of a sudden it softens the approach and you look at it very, very differently. So just bear in mind that whatever the fear is, flip side is need, you identify in yourself, you identify in your partner.
So it's coming back to listening.
Yeah.
And understanding rather than trying to rebut.
Right.
Oh, well, I canceled golf for you and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. So then the person is, keeping score, and you're sitting there, well, I just want to spend time with you. And here you are, you're barking at me and telling me, like, you did me a big favor by canceling golf for me.
We're chatting tonight with Dr. Rebecca Rosenblat, a psychologist, a clinical sexologist, a therapist, about the 10 commandments of healthy relationships. We're going to take a final break, and come back and summarize what we've learned today. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. My guest tonight is Dr. Rebecca Rosenblat. She is a psychologist, clinical sexologist, a therapist. We've been talking about healthy relationships, and she's got 10 commandments of healthy relationships. And one of the things more than anything else that I've learned today, we always knew it, but probably we need to be reminded of it, is we have to listen to understand rather than rebut, and actively listen. And so I'm going to see if I listened well enough by repeating back what some of the 10 commandments are. So number 1 is knowing that our feelings matter, that we matter to our partner. And there are 4 pillars that Dr. Rebecca spoke about, which is being accessible, being responsive, being engaged, and knowing that our partner has our back. Accessible, responsive, engaged, and has our back. Then we talked about the factors in relationships that establish success and failure. And this really was that there has to be more positive than negative. And I thought it was a 7-to-1 ratio. And you're saying it's a 25-to-1 ratio of positive interactions versus negative interactions. And I think that really comes down to that we can be really critical of our partner, and more critical because we know them so well. And we got to watch that and make sure that we build our partner up rather than break them down. Then we talked about number 1 thing that helps a relationship long term, and I found this is interesting. It was nurturing and expressing fondness and admiration. So nurturing and fondness and admiration, and really that's sort of the touch, that's the holding hands, it's the cuddling, it's the nurturing. Nurturing's a word you would use with a child, but it's sort of making someone feel very protected and wanted and desired, and I like that. And then the most important ingredient in making a relationship work, you didn't say it was love, you said it was compassion. So really caring about that other person and having compassion, which is the comment about love as a verb, that you've got to put it into action. Number 5, it's what to do when troubles occur. And you talked about listening with the mindset of being influenced by them rather than listening such that you can rebut what they have to say. So it's really the seek to understand rather than seek to be understood. You got to understand the other person first. Number 6, you talked about this anger that can occur between couples. And what you said was that we have to understand the narrative that's behind that anger that we have ourselves and the anger that the other person has, and understand that something might be triggering us. And we have to understand that trigger and calm down that anger. And you didn't mind the idea about taking timeouts, parking a fight, coming back another time, but it had to be longer than 20 minutes, but not less than 24 hours.
Within 20 minutes to not longer than 24 hours, ideally. So between 20 minutes to 24 hours. It can be less than 24 hours, but not longer, ideally.
And then number 7, we talked about communication. And you said communication, when people say that they're not communicating, it really is they're not connected. And so you really focused on changing the word from communication to connection. And so therefore, there's a lot more about being together than just talking. It's about feeling connected, which I guess is back to all those other things. And you had this line about that words can hurt, destroy and kill relationships and can never be taken back. And so therefore your dad's comment, what was the dad's comment about?
If in doubt, leave it out.
Even if in doubt, leave it out. I love that one. You said that one, and then you said something that Benjamin Franklin said, which is
it's making sure that your brain is engaged before you put your mouth in gear.
Brain engaged before you put your mouth in gear. I love that one. And then number 8 was the things that you need to avoid, these 4 horsemen that Dr. Gottman talked about. And the 4 horsemen were contempt, criticism, defensiveness, and stonewalling. Number 9 was interesting because you described grace as something that you don't deserve, but you grant it, and that you have to give grace to your partner when they've driven you to the brink. And I'm thinking about sort of that song, Amazing Grace, that we grace can be amazing if it's granted when we're the blindest and we don't deserve it.
Amazing really Grace, how sweet that sound. Like, I mean,
exactly.
It's the sweetest thing you can give someone.
And then the 10th thing is we tend to be afraid of a lot of things in relationships. And then you talked about how you navigate through that. And you said that the flip side of fear is need, and we have to understand what people are really worried about when they get triggered. And what their need is. And so therefore it's if someone says that you don't spend enough time with me, don't sort of rebut and say, well, I have spent all this time with you. Actually realize that they're asking for even more time and that you've got to actually
just longing.
So you've got to prove to them that they're worthy or the relationship is worthy, something you're going to invest in, etc.
You listened. You nailed
Fantastic.
it.
Fantastic. So love is an interesting thing.
Mhm.
And you say it's an irresistible desire,
To be desired irresistibly.
an irresistible desire to be desired irresistibly.
Mhm.
That's beautiful.
I think it's that simple. So we just have to say, would I want to be married to me? And a lot of times people would say, no, I wouldn't. I've been negative. I haven't been that great. I haven't been that invested. So fix it.
You know, what's interesting is we've talked about these 10 commandments of healthy relationships. You haven't talked about the physical ones.
As in
Sex.
sex. That's another topic. It's a very juicy topic. I'm not going to just brush it quickly.
Okay, but don't you think that that's important to a healthy relationship?
Absolutely. It's really, really critical.
But it's not one of the 10 commandments. Why?
Well, because that's a topic unto itself.
Okay.
But yes, that's under the topic of intimacy. But yes, it's very, very, very critical. And you know, it's funny, people stop having sex when they're not getting along. That's when you need to have sex even more so, because you release, I'm not talking about if you've been traumatized, because you release oxytocin and a whole bunch of other things that help you bond. And oxytocin is the stay versus stray hormone.
Mhm.
So if anything, that's the time.
That's when you need it.
Yeah, makeup sex, big fan of it.
We've been chatting tonight with Dr. Rebecca Rosenblat about the 10 commandments of healthy relationships. She's got a website called talkwithrebecca.com. And we've had a couple interesting shows. We did a really fascinating show on the differences in the ways that men and women communicate. And it was really quite interesting. I recommend it to you. And then we talked about attachment styles and attachment theory. And that was really quite interesting. So I really appreciate, we've almost done a series of shows together and it's been quite fascinating. I really appreciate it. That's our show for tonight, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I remind you, I'm on every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock on 960 AM. You can stream me online at www.saga960am.ca. Good night, everybody.